We're live.
All right, welcome to another Thursday night of the Guitar Gear Locker. My name is Alex Books. It's my co-host Roger, and we also have, once again, we have our good friends RIk and Jeremy that joined us tonight on our series of rock and hard rock and metal. And tonight is live show 45. And tonight we're kind of starting with the late 70s into the early 80s. So, yeah, maybe Rick, you want to take us off? And
Yeah. So we've had a lot of fun episodes already, and we've already kind of hit the 60s. We know about that, the early 70s, mid 70s. So let's fast forward. So what's starting to happen in the late 70s now that's a little different than everything in front of it? And in my opinion, one of the biggest things would have been the first Van Halen record with Eddie Van Halen. And from the perspective of the guitar tone really changing. Because if you go back to the late 60s, early 70s, you got great tones, but it was more like the organic Marshall tone of the late 60s, the bluesier, blues on steroids kind of thing that we've talked about in the past. Now you've got Eddie with this like volcanic explosion of a guitar sound, and that first album hits where obviously Eruption. I mean, that really was the shot heard around the world. So all the guitar players, whether they be hard rock, high energy blues rock, let's say Pat Travers, kind of stuff, metal, everybody's taking notice. So this is 78, and it's really starting to change the trajectory of where harder edged rock, particularly from the guitar perspective, is going on. Another thing that I think happened, and we hit on this a little bit at the end of our last time, we started getting a really speed element, and I instantly think of Motorhead for that. So with bands like Motorhead, it's not just straight up blues. Oh, there's some bluesy progressions, but it's very fast, very energetic, very hard driving, and that's starting to set up the vibe, if you will, for what's going to become early 80s hard rock and metal. So those are two, and other things, of course, but I mean, those would be the two that really stand out to me. And thinking back to my youth, things that I heard a lot of, the early Van Halen records and all those Motorhead albums from that era.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that was a complete game change. I can remember hearing the first Van Halen record as a kid, and it was just like, so it was like futuristic sounding, if that makes sense.
Totally.
To me, the guitar tone and Eruption. I remember, me and my friends in grade school, and we would, rewind the tape over and over, listening to Eruption, because it was just so like, what is this? I never heard it.
Same here. Had the same experience.
And also, like you were talking about the speed, the music started to get more aggressive, you mentioned Motorhead, and obviously AC/DC, which is straight up rock and roll band, but it was very aggressive, especially the Bon Scott era.
Oh, absolutely.
And and then obviously, like we said, with Eddie coming out, and and also at the tail end of the 70s, you had the birth of a scene that was coming out in Britain, which became the new wave of British heavy metal. So, obviously the forerunners of that scene were like Priest and Motorhead and stuff like that. And so those guys were all starting out in the late 70s. Angel Witch, another band with a killer guitar tone,
absolutely.
First Angel Witch record, and music being a little bit more aggressive, but yeah, wow, what a time.
I think there's less obvious of a blues influence at that point. I mean, there's still some blues, but when you go back, and again, we've hit a little bit on the other episodes, but like, Black Sabbath has some bluesiness in there, even though it's heavy. Deep Purple had some bluesiness, but hard driving rock as well. And I think we're starting to see less of that. It's more energy, harder driving. We're hearing Eddie, like, what in the world are those notes he's doing on Eruption? It wasn't just a typical play up and down the pentatonic scale real fast, like
and even the classical sense to it too. You had a lot of these guitar players that were about to come out, especially in California, that were taking influenced by players like Uli Roth and stuff like that. And like you said, there were still some blues elements in there, but it was kind of a combination of this kind of virtuoso approach to guitar playing. and Eddie's a part of that as well, you know. And then you guys got like Randy Rhoads, which was unknown with Quiet Riot at that time in the 70s. But if you heard those two Quiet Riot records with Randy that they did, I can't remember, maybe it was that 79,
Yeah, I think
78, 78, 79, something like that. And I think they were signed to like CBS out of Japan. So like those records got nowhere, you know.
Yeah, you couldn't even get them.
Yeah. But I mean, even the Randy had that tone then, you know.
Yes, I totally agree. Yep.
You know, fast forward to Wizard of Oz. And from what I understand, I think I saw an interview with Rudy Sarza talking about when Randy went over to England, you know, to work on the Blizzard of Oz record. He told those guys over in the States, there's this scene going on here, you know, in England right now, these new wave of British metal or whatever that he was talking about. And Rudy has a theory that he was a little bit influenced by going to see some of those bands on the Blizzard of Oz record.
It certainly explains the leap from, because a lot of the stuff, because even Van Halen, explosive, aggressive, high gain, the idea of a high gain guitar sound was that's sort of to me a ground zero for that spongy, you know, what everything to follow it.
Right.
Dividing line. But like when you think of what Randy Rhoads was a part of before he joined Ozzy, it's the Sunset Strip. It's party music. It's sort of happy, good time music. And then in England at the time, it's like this kind of dreary. Well, I don't know if it's dreary, but it's more aggressive and meaner and darker. Yeah. And so those bands like, you know, like Motorhead, Saxon, going on, like you hear that. And then for him, it's kind of like, well, I have the classical training and the discipline as a guitar player. Perhaps he's hearing that and going, well, if this is the fresh thing and we're starting a fresh band, this is the way to move as opposed to continuing with the bubblegum stuff. Because those early Quiet Riot records with him are pretty much like English style glam pop, like Slade or
Slade. Well, I was going to say Slade, definitely.
RIk, maybe, you know, that sort of style of like, you know, teenagers dancing in a gymnasium kind of songwriting, you know, kids pumping their fist and, you know, expressing anger through their fashion and through their music choices. But the Van Halen thing, I think, you know, we have all this 70s stuff that you could call proto metal, but I think Eddie Van Halen and Alex as well. I mean, the whole band gets credit, but Eddie's sort of path to just like trying to find the sound in his head and be able to play it at a volume that clubs will allow him to play it in leads to this cool, you know, brown sound, so to speak. But even a modern high gain amp that you can buy today, some of the most popular ones bearing his name, have that fizzy, spongy upper treble kind of edge to them that didn't exist before him, but now have become like the thing that every modern heavy metal or heavy music guitar player, even heavy hard rock people are looking for as part of the package. And so it is sort of like that big bang moment where not everybody followed suit. Like AC/DC was still aggressive, but they kept the guitars more or less clean. But there was a snarl to the guitars nonetheless. There's something about it there. Right. But I think, just all these things going on all at once, all over the world. And then that cultural exchange, I suppose, that Randy had of going to England and being like, it's different here. You know, it's not all sunshine and surfing and stuff. It's like there's some aggression, and also maybe probably feeling like he had to, you know, if he was going to stand out, that was going to be the road to go down to stand out versus, you know, the run of the mill. To me, the first couple Quiet Riot records with him sound sort of unexceptional songwriting wise, in terms of nothing new under the sun. Whereas his stuff with Ozzy, particularly like, Blizzard of Oz, that first record, you're like, you can't really compare it to much before it in a direct way.
Right. Yeah. And plus Randy had Bob Daisley and Lee Kersick there. There were two veterans already, from Uriah Heep. And he's working with pros, real pros that have all this.
Right, true, yeah. Those Quiet Riot 1 and 2, I don't know who the drummer was, but you can feel the tempo makes you seasick sometimes. They were kids and they weren't quite developed. And then, you put him in a room with people who aren't going to hold him back creatively. Yeah. Like sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you're catering to the people that you play with. That's every band. But then if you find you're more advanced than your band, and then you get into this new situation where everything you do is just we could hang that. We can hang, because we've been doing this for 10, 15 years longer than you. And, it was cool of you to kind of let him be that explosive creative person, even though he's a young, unknown player.
Yeah. And then there's another big shift, which was Black Sabbath with Dio coming out.
Oh, yeah.
And, that record, I mean, that was just same thing. It kind of like with Randy, I think Tony was able to explore some things musically maybe he wasn't able to explore with Ozzy.
Yeah.
That he could with Dio as a songwriter. And, if anything, Sabbath became even more metal, maybe more, even, darker in certain ways. And, because Heaven and Hell is completely different record than the Sabbath of the 70s.
It at times they got kind of faster, more rocking, more tightened up and buttoned up compared to Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, which is all over the place and loose and awesome. But it was more they were growing up. They were becoming refined songwriters and refined musicians, and just sort of hitting a new stride, and that's proof that a band is the sum of the parts. So you can change a part, and then somebody else comes in and it can either screw up the chemistry or add a new spark that completely just awakens something new in you as a musician. Whether that's when, whether it's Alex Books joining Immolation and perhaps, Bob knows he's got somebody to play with different, or Steve, versus previous drummer, and just being okay, I got these new guys, I can do new stuff, and it keeps the spark, nice and bright.
You're this guy did this and this, and now I can do this and this too.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Two of the biggest albums in 1980 for hard rock definitely had a major change, in the band. One being the Black Sabbath with Dio, like you said, and then the other being AC/DC with Brian Johnson now having to replace the late Bon Scott. So you have a new AC/DC record, 1980, Back in Black. You have Heaven and Hell from Black Sabbath. You got Dio now singing for Sabbath, Brian Johnson singing for AC/DC, and you got a different flavor now of ice cream in the ice cream shop, so to speak.
Right. And also,
they both pulled it off too. Dio,
exactly. Obviously very successful albums, and fantastic records have stood the test of time, and huge sales. But fans love those records. I'm a big fan of both of those albums.
Yeah, it's almost in hindsight, it's sort of anomalous. How many bands get away with such significant roster changes? But back then, it was kind of happening fairly. It wasn't unusual. We've talked before about Deep Purple. With by the time they get to Mark III, they've got two lead singers now in Mark III versus the two previous lead singers of the two previous eras. And you just keep rolling. I wonder, I don't know. I wonder why it's so unique to that era. Because I can't imagine, when Iron Maiden switched singers, it was early in their career and it helped them blossom. And we'll get to them.
Right, yeah.
But then later on, when Bruce left and they brought in Blaze Bayley, it was just a total, it just nobody seemed to embrace it the way that I'm sure they hoped people would.
But not just in the hard rock and the metal, but if you go back into the set, and I like the example with Deep Purple, that was excellent. But also like bands like King Crimson or Yes on the progressive side of things in the 70s. You got these great bands, and it's like you need a flow chart to keep track of all the people going in and out of those bands. And so it did happen definitely, and you know, whether it be hard rock, metal, prog, progressive rock, you know, something that we definitely saw.
Right.
Yeah, some of those bands about this before, they kind of got wrecked in the 80s.
Yes, correct.
Yes, would be one of
those.
Yeah,
no pun intended, but a whole different band once they got into the 80s there from the 70s.
I'm going to throw a comment up real quick from Shred Ward. I saw this earlier on. He said at 45, seeing a Cannibal Corpse on Ace Ventura blew him away. And, you know, that's definitely an era that we're going to get into is Cannibal Corpse and death metal, black metal, and all that kind of stuff as we work our way to it. But yeah, definitely.
And just for the record, we're kind of going chronologically. So anybody that's seen our other shows, I mean, we were all the way back in the 60s and the early 70s, the mid 70s. So now we're like 79, 80-ish. And then like Roger said, as we keep marching ahead, it gets darker and heavier and thrashier and more metal. You know, it's just crazy where it goes. You know?
On that same digression that Shredward brought us, I can relate to that very directly because I was going to that movie around that same age of my life because I'm 43. And so imagine how I felt when I was standing on the side of the stage a couple of years ago on tour.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That's interesting.
I was literally saying that to myself, like, dude, can you believe it? Like I was talking to that. I would have been like 12, I guess. I was talking to 12-year-old me being like, dude, can you believe this shit?
Right. You'll be thrashing it out. These
anyway,
time thrash.
My moment for something like that was Alice Cooper on the Muppets. You know.
Oh,
was that? I think he did Welcome to My Nightmare or
something.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Yeah.
Oh shit! Alice Cooper's on TV. There he is. You know.
I think Alex is still scarred by Alice Cooper. He brings him up in every nightmare story.
Right. We're gonna keep bringing Alice back for repeating stories here.
So where do we go to now?
Well, there's still more in 80. I mean, we also have things like Judas Priest putting out British Steel. So now it's a little bit different from early Priest, like their first couple of albums, and they're gearing up for the 80s now. And obviously that was a huge album in 1980 and, great record. The production, it definitely sounded very modern, I thought, at the time when you go back to that era of the albums that were coming out around then.
Yeah. British Steel, the production was like major step up, you know.
Right.
And the guitar tone on that too, as well. You know, it's like, you know, hell bent for leather, and then you had, you know,
it's like you lifted the blanket off of the band, and it just became
exactly
alive. Sort of thing.
I mean, 1980. I could go on and on. I mean, you got Women and Children First. You know, the third Van Halen record that came out, which was another groundbreaking record. You know, first Angel Witch record.
Merciful Fate,
You know, Merciful Fate was that 82? 82? Yeah, EP.
I think so, yeah, definitely. They were definitely doing
and then we got the first Maiden record.
Right, first Iron Maiden.
Yeah, because that's sort of like a band coming in and saying like we're the new generation. Because
and they were
out for a while, Sabbath, and it was kind of like almost you would call it maybe heavy metal phase 2.
Yeah,
that's a good description.
And progressive too. And they were a progressive, you know, metal band, especially when you listen to tracks like Phantom of the Opera and stuff like that off the first record. There's a lot of parts, and it's kind of an epic tune and a little bit longer than your normal hard rock song, you know, or heavy metal song. And Maiden too. I mean, for me, it was kind of the same thing as Kiss for me, because I first saw as a kid what they look like, and I was like, this is what I'm looking for. Right. So Maiden, you know, my first Maiden records were Made in Japan. I don't know if anybody remembers that.
I remember that.
That came out, and that came out right after
Killer. There you go. You strike the pose.
Yeah. But I saw, you know, the first Maiden record, Killers, at the record store, and I was just like, "What is this? I gotta have this."
Yeah.
And the music was ferocious, but very melodic, and the virtuoso guitar playing, the amazing bass playing, the amazing drumming. It was just like next level,
And really like notey, diatonic riffing, and just sort of like it had the blues edge to it, but it also had this very British, almost like folk quality to a lot of
Right.
Sure.
Yeah, I got you. Yeah.
to a lot of the guitar melodies and stuff, which is probably an extension of that Thin Lizzy vibe, where
Totally.
that sounds like an Irish melody, but you're playing it on guitar instead of,
Well, it's kind of like songs like, they took like songs like Thin Lizzy had, like Massacre and Warrior or whatever and stuff, and just kind of like next level,
Well, that's kind of what keeps happening, though, is like when you have, we talked in the proto metal episode 2 episodes ago, people, check it out. And you have bands, you have Helter Skelter, where there's moments of heaviness. You have Cream, where it's heavy, but there's also light to the dark and stuff. But then you have bands starting to take like the most extreme elements of those bands and
focusing on it.
Yeah. So even like if we can go to Ace of Spades, it's like,
sure,
it's fast, and it's like if you change the tonality of the bass and the guitar on there to something less grimy, less dirty, it's not as powerful. So we're getting into like crunch everywhere when it comes to guitars, and then virtuosity, speed, and so forth.
Yeah. Focusing more on the musicianship.
Yeah, but taking like the heavy thing and making that the whole thing, as opposed to like taking it at like we said before, like Led Zeppelin had heavy metal moments, but they were also super dynamic and had all this sort of folkier, more mellow stuff too. Whereas like you listen to British Steel, there's none of that. You listen to Ace of Spades, there's none of that. It's all just like intensity in your face. It's still dynamic, but it's just more trimming what you might call the excesses. Hello, Dwight. What's cracking?
And I didn't put Rick's name up with mine over here.
We're going to confuse the audience
and
tonight.
Rick,
Roger Sutherland over here.
Yeah. Roger and Sutherland.
Yeah, Roger and Sutherland. Roger and Rick.
So what else are we missing in 1980? I mean, there's
well, here's something I'll throw out. We're talking about some of these bands changing, getting heavier. Let's go the other direction. So we talked about one of my big influences as a kid, Kiss. Now we get to 79, 80. They're going the opposite. They're getting more pop friendly, a lot of power pop. We had
Unmasked.
We had the things going on there in 1980, Unmasked. And they're not going quite that metal-esque way that we're seeing Judas Priest going, or what you all just described with the Motorhead and Iron Maiden examples.
Yeah, they did Unmasked, and that was like a power pop album.
Power pop, that's what I would call it.
And then I feel like they had to make up for it with Creatures of the Night.
Creatures of the Night, and they got heavier back on that in 82.
So that is like a super underrated Kiss record.
Creatures?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's a great album.
Bryan Adams' best song is on there.
Right, that's right. Yeah, well, I guess even going back to Dynasty, I mean, there was a lot of stuff where, as a kid, I thought it was all the original members playing. I felt, well, Peter Criss didn't even really play on hardly any of that album. They had Anton Fig, I believe, that played majority of the drum on that.
I mean, the Ace Frehley record too. I think he played.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And then music for the Elder had, I think Eric Carr played most on that. He wrote some songs on there too.
Right. Correct. Yep.
Yeah.
Gene Simmons doesn't sue people for that kind of stuff.
Hey,
much.
Yeah. Right. We don't. Yeah.
If you get sued by Kiss, haven't you made it?
I guess so.
I would think.
Yeah.
That's
I have a friend's band, and they had their band the Casualties, right? That's the punk band. They
Mhm.
did a thing called the Casualties Army, and apparently they received a letter from somebody on the Kiss team about having to not be able to do that. Which
Oh,
and I was
boy.
like, that's cool. They were psyched though because they were all Kiss fans. So like, dude, they noticed.
Well, it's like King Diamond. If you remember in the 80s, Gene Simmons sent like a cease and desist, and he had to
for
change
sure.
his makeup.
That's right,
style
right. Yeah.
in the mid 80s, you know.
Yeah. Def Leppard On Through the Night comes out,
Oh, yeah.
which is
Mm.
also another sort of we're the new kids. This is what the kids are doing, sort of.
Yeah.
Right.
One of my desert islands would be Def Leppard High on Dry.
Yeah.
That would be one record that would have to go with me.
There's so many cool just guitar things going on.
Yeah, Pete Willis, Steve Clark. I mean,
Yep.
man, they were such a great guitar team.
Mhm.
And before obviously, Def Leppard is more known as more poppy, stuff.
Yeah.
But the first 3 records, really up to Pyromania, were. I mean, and they were one of the leaders of the new wave of British heavy metal. As much as I know they never liked that term, from what I understand. But On Through the Night and High and Dry. I mean, man, there's just riff after riff on those records. Very riffy albums, and the production on High and Dry, which was their first record, I think, with Mutt Lange.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Like it was kind of like the same thing with Maiden and Killers, where on Killers they got Martin Birch, for the production. And then, Def Leppard from On Through the Night to High and Dry, they got Mutt Lange, and it just took things up to another level with the production and the song.
For me, was one of those bands where I think I discovered them on Pyromania and then worked backwards. I did that with a couple bands. Like I'd catch them when they come out with something and work back to their older stuff.
Yeah.
Me, it was High and Dry. I saw Saturday Night. High and Dry, the song, the video that they had on MTV, and they also had Bring It On the Heartache. So there was videos of that, which like a live kind of thing. But I remember seeing that on MTV. It's just like, oh my god, what is this? And I was like Def Leppard freak, when that came out. And then Pyromania was just like huge. Like every kid in school was just.
Yeah, I was in high school when that hit, and everybody had it. Yep.
Yeah. But Def Leppard. I mean, another band. Trying to think what else I'm missing here. In 1980, well, first Diamond Head record came out.
Yeah, Lightning to the Nation.
Another very riffy album. Just great,
riffy, and undeniably influential to the biggest band to ever come out of this topic we're talking about.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
for that alone, and then Strong Arm of the Law and Wheels of Steel.
Yes.
Saxon. We gotta mention Saxon, definitely.
Yeah. The Rods, Rock Hard.
Rods. Oh yeah.
Yep. So I got a list here of stuff. Some of it's like not worth mentioning, but like, just sort of.
Tigers of Pang Tang. The first record came out in 80, or was it 80 or 81? I can't remember.
It could have been early 80s.
And that's not even. That wasn't, and the first one wasn't.
The record Wildcat by Tigers came out, but that was not yet with the legendary John Sykes. Later of Roger's favorite band, Whitesnake.
Yeah. Roger's favorite band.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Happy birthday, David Coverdale.
That's right.
Oh, my favorite guy.
Your favorite guy.
Oh.
Yeah, you were a big fan.
Did you hear his band with Ingve? David Coverdale and Ingve Malmsteen? Did you hear it?
You know what? That would be my dream. If I got to have dinner with David Coverdale and Ingve Malmsteen, my life would be completely shit.
Oh,
I guess I could never have Ingve on this show.
You'd have to try.
I'll be absent that week.
So, what is the beef against David Coverdale specifically? I know you've.
I don't know what
you just don't like the band.
I swear, if he comes on the radio, because my wife listens to the channel series where that would come on, And if he comes on, I will literally change the channel every time.
Wow.
I don't know what it is. He just irks the shit out of me. I don't know.
I remember
what it
years
is.
ago when he was doing lessons with me, he said, "Yeah, no white snake, no."
Yeah, he would say, "Do you want to do white snake?" No.
He's like, "No, we're
No
not
white
doing
snake.
white snake." I remember that from a good number of years ago.
I
Yeah.
I totally thought of you, Roger, the last time we did this and we were talking about how you hate Whitesnake. The next morning, I'm in my truck driving back from band practice, and it's one of those 2 for 2 weekends on the radio where they play 2 songs by every artist.
Uh-huh.
There's 2 Whitesnake songs in a row. I was just like, I almost want to just call you and like hold the phone up.
You want to hear something funny? I'm
like
ashamed
it too
to
much,
tell this story, but I'm a man. I can admit to my faults. So I was driving down. This is since we've all been talking about Whitesnake and how much I hate him. I'm driving down the road and just like paying attention to traffic, and I'm whistling along with a song.
Mm-hmm.
It was Whitesnake. I was like, "Damn it!" And then I turned the channel.
So Roger, have you? What do you think about the Deep Purple era with David Coverdale, like Burn, for instance?
I don't like him.
Glenn Hughes, yeah.
I don't get.
He's a hater. He's a hater.
Not even David Purple can sacri- or say
You got to give Burn a listen.
Mark III line. Now he's not a fan of the Mark III line.
Yeah.
You know what? And I got to tell you, back then I didn't even know he was in the band.
All right.
And I think that was another my druggy uncle had me listening to him.
Oh,
so
okay.
I probably thought he was cool then.
All right.
I was too young.
I guess he was the first singer to sing in a band that was known as the Mark III lineup, right? I mean, the Burn era, Deep Purple.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then
so I guess we'll move on to 81 and.
Can I say one more thing though? We didn't mention this yet. Officially, Michael Schenker's first MSG album in 1980.
How do I miss that one?
Coming off the UFO,
Yes.
he's in UFO and forming the Michael Schenker group.
And UFO released an album that year too, without him.
Yeah.
Didn't do very well.
Right.
And also UFO's record, which I can't remember the name of it, which was their first without him that year.
No Place to Run.
Yeah, that first tune's not too bad. It's a couple songs.
That guitar player they got was pretty cool.
Paul Chapman, right? Paul Chapman.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's just but that's the opposite side of what happened with like AC/DC or these bands that change a key member like Black Sabbath or whatever. Or Def Leppard, get rid of Pete Willis and get Phil Collin and let's be the biggest band in the world while we're at it. But the opposite happens often where you get Michael Schenker did not form UFO, but when he joined it became UFO. And when
he transformed that band.
Get out of here with this crap.
Right.
They shrunk immensely in popularity because even though to me what I listen to UFO, a big part of it is Phil Mogg's lyric writing and the songs in general. And there's so much more to it than just Michael Schenker plays guitar in this band. Right. But chemistry is defined by just the people in the room and what they're creating together. The lightning that you catch in the bottle.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Michael Schenker, man. How do I miss that one?
and then also Richie Blackmore, with Rainbow, he's kind of shifting too because now you don't have Dio in Rainbow. You had that album called Down to Earth. And that was a different flavor. That was more like a rock and roll album. It wasn't so much Dungeons and Dragons and
since you've been gone, right? Since you've been gone, right?
Since you've been gone was the single off that. Yeah.
Boo. Ugh. But that's what happened. What that's interesting is like some of these artists are adapting with the times. Like if you go from Ozzy Sabbath to Dio Sabbath, you're like, wow, it's a breath of fresh air. It's a different band, but you could tell it's the same guys, but it's got this new energy to it. And then you go from like Rainbow, Long Live Rock and Roll and Rainbow Rising to, the Graham Bonnet era where they're trying to soften it so that they can maybe make some more money, get more mainstream, when in fact it turns out perhaps the the move is to just go harder, which is probably against a lot of people's, more sensible thoughts at the time. Like, because you're like, well, we're too hard, we can't get bigger. But right at this time is when that's what people are starting to want, which is interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Like the taste and the flavor of, rock music in general is like, we want it faster, we want it heavier, we want it meaner, we want it more rebellious. And then some of these older bands are like, who go the opposite way, miss out when they could have actually just stayed not what they were, but they could have evolved in that different direction.
But didn't it seem like you all mentioned like Motorhead and all that, and things were getting harder and faster, but Def Leppard and some of those bands definitely weren't harder.
Well, Def Leppard's first couple records were kind of on they were flying in the tailwinds, or whichever the winds are the ones that are pushing you. Like AC/DC.
Yeah.
But with more heavy metal, Judas Priest influence and kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For the first couple of records, they did get softer, but it was, that's come Pyromania, where Mutt Lange is like, wait, you guys could be an arena band. Why don't we write songs that sound good acoustically in an arena? That's something he told them.
Yeah, I mean, they had songs like, one of the first songs I ever learned on guitar was Def Leppard "Wasted."
Yeah.
Oh yeah, a great riff. Yeah,
that was very aggressive, heavy for back then.
Right. One thing that we didn't, I think it'd be kind of cool to visit this subject, and we haven't, is how guitars were evolving.
Oh,
yes.
Right.
Yes.
That would be a way. Yeah, I think.
Yep.
Going to that Van Halen thing, you can talk about the guitars themselves, but for me, a lot of it is the peripheral stuff, the introduction of the high output humbucker.
Oh yeah.
Combined with the sense that these Marshall plexis aren't giving us enough. And so what do? We mod those to have master volumes or variacs. I mean, variacs were pretty esoteric, even though the most popular guy in the world was using them. But then you get Marshall finally coming out with the master volume JMPs in like 77-ish, I want to say, which is essentially the precursor to the JCM 800. It's almost exactly the same in terms of circuit topology and stuff, but the only thing that's different is the transformers. That's what I understand from the JMP to the 800, but the JMPs sound heavier. I don't know.
Right.
But anyway, you have a preamp now and you can juice it. And then also people are, Boss is coming out with overdrive pedals. Ibanez has Maxon making them the Tube Screamer pedals. And now you can, without having to use the treble booster, which is sort of a weird device, you could just take your regular sound, push it into the amp, add some grit, and now you have a high gain sound like Van Halen without having to tinker in the garage and electrocute yourself with a variac and rebiasing your tubes to run at 90 volts instead of 120 volts.
right. Yeah.
Right.
Even go back in the 70s, there's Tom Schultz from Boston too.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know if we mentioned him, but that guitar sound, with that device he invented.
Well, the Rockman.
Rockman, yeah.
Here's what I learned about that.
Me about that earlier today. That's weird.
Okay.
2 times in a day that came out.
The Rockman.
Apparently, the first Boston record, the guitar tone is apparently one of his Marshalls that he like modded the crap out of. Probably some other stuff, juicing up the output of the guitar. And so the Rockman was his way of trying to get that recorded sound into a device that he could take with him, or you could use and have it be, maybe more reliable. So he was essentially inventing one of the earliest forms of an amp modeler.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He was but he was only amp he was modeling was the sounds he was getting on record, so that he could like have a simpler version of all the crap he was doing in the studio to create this, pretty unique to him sound. It was like, and I feel like that sound influenced Randy Rhoads. When I hear Randy Rhoads' tone, I hear Tom Schultz, that crispy, fizzy
chorus kind of vibe too.
Yeah.
And wasn't Randy Rose putting like an MXR distortion plus into the Marshall, if I'm not mistaken?
That's right. Yeah. So,
Mhm.
which I have a distortion plus here, and a couple weeks ago, I put it into my Friedman on like a lower high gain setting that would have been compatible, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, we're getting there. Yeah,
Right.
distortion plus comes out, the DOD 250 comes out, Yngwie Malmsteen's favorite pedal, Roger. And then we have like the Boss, the overdrive Boss pedals and the tube screamers. And then you have guys like, while this is all going on, you also have people like Jose Arredondo and Lee Jackson in LA who are modifying them to add gain stages with the idea initially to be able to get the fully distorted amp sound at a lower volume on stage. But what it also creates is more gain than those amps were actually capable of in the first place. Like they're putting extra preamp tubes in there. They're putting clipping diodes in there like you would a pedal into the amp directly and just making stuff fizzier.
Did you see that Dave Friedman did a Jose amp recently?
Yeah. Yeah, he had the blessing of he worked with Jose's daughter.
Yeah.
And they get like a royalty from it, which is cool.
Dwight says you got a BE overdrive distortion pedal and use it a lot.
Cool.
Be careful, Dwight. I bought that pedal and then I wound up buying the amp. But I'll say this: I bring the pedal with me on tour because I don't bring the Friedman with me on tour because I can't afford to replace it. And then either use a clean channel of a different tube amp or power amp, and that thing really does do a great job of capturing much of the same vibe that the actual amp does. So,
right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rick. I'm sorry. I just quick question here, and I love to hear your opinions on this. The change in the Judas Priest guitar sound from the first couple of records, and then they get to Unleashed in the East and British Steel. Yeah. So why was that something to do with the Marshall amps, like you're talking about? Because there's a difference in the tone on those amps, I think.
Yeah, I would imagine so, but I also, again, I don't know what the exact answer is. I do know that in that era, you start seeing the JMPs on stage behind them, the plexis. And so there's also even if you have the 4-holer that's not the master volume, there's cascade gain mods you can make to those. And then also they're probably looking around, looking like, where's the louder pickup? This super distortion, pop that in. Like the stock pickup. Because early on they were using treble boosters like Iomi, but I think like you said, during that era, things got tighter and like more. It was still muscular, but like it had this, they got modern sounding, and it's
then you get to Screaming for Vengeance, where just like, all out there,
crazy.
It almost sounds like a different band from, like, say, the rock and roll, the first early Judas Priest, and then you get, like you said, Screaming for Vengeance, and those guitars are just like ripping your head off, And
I wonder if some of that too is just they're making more money. They've been touring for a while, and the bank accounts are growing, and they have the money to invest more in their gear,
right?
Start getting the better stuff, and and then also, having a direct line to Jim Marshall and saying, "Hey, Jim Marshall, we're the biggest heavy metal band from your country who loves your amps. Can you make them sound more like this?"
Right. More metal. Yeah. And they definitely stepped it up a few notches there, I think, as far as the sound, and the production and all.
I don't know about y'all, but when people start doing that, like, there's something special about when they first come out and that equipment, and then they start like Stevie Ray Vaughan lost something when he went to lipstick pickups.
Oh, the lipstick, right?
Yeah, that more modern guitar. I was like,
there is a difference.
Different mojo to it. Yeah.
The other thing to consider that I just popped into my head was this late 70s, early 80s is also around the time that guitar speakers become higher in power handling. So for years you had the greenbacks, which were 20 and then 25 and then 30 watts a piece. Now we're getting like, creambacks. We're getting the G12 65s, the 70s, you have speaker cabinets that can handle 250 to 300 watts of power, and
Right.
that
Yeah.
reaction, that clean, free of breakup from the speaker anyway, changes the tonality versus what you get from a greenback, because the greenback would distort in a way that was cool, but now you're getting this low end thump and tightness that the greenback would fall apart trying to replicate unless you had a whole bunch of speakers with one power source. Now you can get like, that's kind of helping to modernize guitar tones as well, I think, is that extra, like when I plug in one of my heads to a greenback cabinet, it sounds cool. And then when I plug it into something with like vintage 30s or the G12 like 75s, there's a notable difference, particularly in the low end fidelity. The greenbacks just can't do it, so it cuts it right off. And then like these modern speakers have more thump and more fidelity all around and more just sort of headroom.
Yeah. Well, speaking of low end, if you fast forward to 81, there's a band that's not known for their musicianship, but for their ferociousness, probably influenced the whole thrash metal scene in general. So, so is Venom,
Yes.
Welcome to Hell came out.
Speaking of low end, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Record.
But it's so heavy and just extreme.
Oh yeah. That's the
It literally, like when I was a kid, I saw I don't know if it was Cream magazine or Hit Parader or something, and I saw a photo of Venom, and it was like scary. And then when I heard it, it was scary. Now when I hear it, it puts me in a good mood. It's just like,
it's
like
cold at the top. You're just like, I can't believe this happened.
It's like AC/DC Venom to me. It's like or Motorhead. It's like drinking good time music that you wind up destroying a house, towards the end of the night or something like that. But
sounds like that might have happened with you.
Yeah, it has.
Well,
many years ago.
Proves like, well, Venom kind of follows in that great tradition of the visual band, because back then, remember too, we're reading magazines still, kids.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You might see
them like that.
You see a photo of a band, like if you never heard Slayer and then you saw pictures of them performing live during like the Hello 8s era, you'd be like, I remember seeing pictures of like Glenn Benton and Deicide and be like, I don't know what they sound like, but I bet that's cool. And then, you go check it out. So,
and there would be no Slayer or Deicide.
Oh, 100%.
Venom,
right.
Or even Metallica for almost,
Well, no, it's that next step of like, let's just be,
over the top.
more extreme, more over the top. And the tree that goes from Venom to subgenre metal is like its own episode. You got black metal, thrash metal, everything.
But we could go to the opposite side of the spectrum. We could focus on, what was happening in California too. So you had all these, like talking about guitar players taking it to the next level. I mean, obviously Eddie kind of, started that whole thing and inspired a lot of those guys. But then you got guys like George Lynch coming out. You got Warren DeMartini. You got what's his
Jakey
name?
Lee was
Jakey Lee. Unbelievable. Jakey Lee's probably my favorite out of those guys.
Yeah, I'm a big fan, definitely. Yep.
And so there's these virtuoso guitar players coming out of, in particularly the LA area, that are starting to come out in the scene, which is hard rock. It's before I think it got, because when Motley Crue and Rat came out, I mean, obviously the Image, but they were still very hard edged music. The Rat EP or the first Rat album, first two Motley Crue records.
Fast for Love is raw.
Love's great. Shout the Devil. I listen to those records like crazy. I still listen to those records.
Yeah, and I still enjoy the early stuff.
Well, there's like this, because I don't even know if it's influenced by Eddie in the sense of like musicality, because Eddie to me was like a blues guy who collided with like a free jazz, like, John Coltrane, almost like off the cuff, emotional stream of consciousness sort of a player. But what you have, especially in like that Sunset Strip scene, is electric guitar and heavy metal guitar becomes a real discipline, the way that classical music would be a discipline, or any sort of high form of art. They're treating it with the same level of discipline, whereas like blues based music, there's a discipline to it as well, but it's fairly basic. It's technical sense, and it's more about like the feelings that you can put out forth. Whereas like now you have people who are like studying positional scale patterns and 3-note per string runs and all this stuff that comes after that. Maybe it's influenced by the fusion stuff from the 70s, because that's the only place that really existed to that degree besides jazz prior. And you're like, yeah, like how does a guy like Warren DeMartini, or who was one of Frank Zappa's favorite guitar players, I don't know if you knew that.
Yeah.
Or George Lynch, who's just got, there's this new thing where like the guitar is serious and it's competitive. And I want to be the guy that's like outshines everybody else. And there's a guitar culture in California that's very intense, likely rooted with the fact that, Fender is rooted there, and there's such a entertainment business going on there anyway. But it's a really interesting time to get all these. There's players from that scene you never even heard of that like totally smoked,
Yeah. That was like guitar haven right there in LA. So many amazing guitar players.
And then everybody from everywhere wound up going there. It became the place. If you're, that you're just some random person from Pennsylvania or Ohio or Middle America. You're like, well, I'm the top dog here, but I want to take it seriously. I got to go out there. Yeah. But Charvel predates Jackson, and Jackson bought Charvel.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, but you
had Charvel Jackson.
Charvel Jackson, I remember that. The merge.
So they have like a guitar culture that's similar to car culture, where they're modding stuff.
Hot rodded guitars.
They're just trying to be like, how can we take what Leo Fender and Jim Marshall have given us and push the circuits, push the designs so that we can get more speed. There's guitar like a Charvel or a Jackson or an Ibanez, which are all guitars that become, big in this heyday. They are built for speed. Like when you play those guitars, you want to play fast. They got thin necks, they got big fat frets. Like a lot of times they got hot pickups, and you hit a harmonic and you barely even tap it, and it's like exploding out of your speaker.
Right.
Well, and they must have done something right with guitars, because everybody now seems to be wanting an 80s guitar or an 80s style guitar or super strat, what have you.
Well, I
saw Randy Rhoads with that Jackson white Concorde, V as a kid in the magazines, and I was just so attracted to that. Like that is like the most badass guitar I ever seen in my life. They even became more aggressive looking, the guitars.
The guitars themselves become part of the band's image.
Right.
It used to just be like, what you wore, how your hair looked, and what kind of faces you were making was like part of the thing. And now it's like, what's this guy going to come out on stage with? Like Randy Rhoads' guitar, Eddie's guitar, a lot of these, like George Lynch with the Bengal tiger stripes, Warren DeMartini with the kamikaze design. It was like everybody had their own vibe. Now the guitar becomes a visual statement, and then obviously the guy playing it or gal plays like how they play it becomes the sonic statement.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for joining us, Angelo. He said he
Hey,
really
BC
loved his
Rich,
run of Wizard Necks on Ibanez and some
Mm.
BC Rich.
BC, oh, yeah, the BC
Ironbirds.
Rich.
Yeah. The Iron
Well,
Bird.
we talked about how aggressive. So PRS was mentioned by Cheech. So the guitars were looking aggressive. Maybe not with PRS.
Well, I
But
feel
during that time, that's when he would have been cutting his teeth up at my old stomping
Well,
ground.
you know what? With PRS, the way I look at it is they, it was kind of like a refined vintage guitar. You know, it was like taking the elements of the vintage guitar, but hot rodding it, in a sense, and just making it play better, making better parts and all that.
Right.
The craftsmanship, the custom element to it, like Jackson.
It was like a hot rod guitar for grown-ups.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and also I wonder because PRS kind of becomes, known on the national scene more towards like the mid '80s, right? Kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Santana.
Yeah, Santana in '85. I was in.
So I wonder if it's also a reaction to all the crazy shit that you're seeing in guitar magazines at the time, where it's like everything's pointy, it's neon, it's like Floyd Rose and Kaler trims on everything, and everything is sort of over the top. I mean, some of the paint jobs you see on these guitars are absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Some good, some not so good. And then Paul Reed Smith comes out with this sort of reaction to that.
Yeah.
So that's what I would see.
Dwight said he loved the Jackson Rhodes. Then
yeah, I like them
Randy
too.
Literally,
I do.
All right.
Wow.
Literally, the first Jackson ever made, the first serialized Jackson was J0001.
Oh wow, for KK Danny. Wow. Very cool.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, because
He did. Yeah, of course. He's one who convinced him to put Jackson on the logo.
Well, no, as I understand it, and I'm a nerd, so I read interviews with nerds like Grover Jackson myself, and apparently, so Grover Jackson was still technically working for Charvel when he was commissioned by Randy to build the guitar. R was so off-brand with what Charvel was doing, which was like the bolt-on Super Strat and stuff like that he was afraid to put the Charvel name on it. And so I don't know if maybe it was Randy who suggested just put your name on it, and then that's Jackson Guitars is born.
Oh, okay. I never knew that story. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And then he made the black.
I recall hearing that same story. I think.
Yeah.
From an interview with Grover Jackson, actually.
Yeah. Right.
Now, is it safe to say at this point in time, we're talking 80, 81, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but the last holdout, they still use that single coil pickup. I think it was Richie Blackmore. He's staying with the single coil. Yeah. Everybody else is kind of going more to humbuckers, or they're putting humbuckers into Strats. But I think Richie was still playing a Fender Strat with single coils, if I'm not mistaken.
He was, yeah, during those rainbow.
Well, if you think about the level of gain that's increasing, and then you have that 60 cycle hum, and now I can play in my bedroom. I could play a Strat with high gain and think it sounds pretty cool. But like when you're playing an arena, that 60 cycle hum that's this small it's in the PA super loud.
Yeah, right.
And then also everybody's trying to get more gain, and there's a certain amount of output that you can't get out of a stock Strat pickup, which is why you got to carve it up and put a humbucker in, like if somebody super famous did.
Right.
Yeah. And another guy that
before P90.
Yeah, the P90s are pretty much done, I think, at that point.
Ingve. Ingve hit the scene in 83. What was that?
Yeah.
The Steeler record, right? I think.
Right. Yeah.
So he did that, and then he did the Alcatraz record with
but I think it was using like a stacked DiMarzio, right? It wasn't really a pure single
coil.
Okay.
I don't know.
It looked like a single coil, but it was stacked.
Were those now?
Carry on amongst yourselves.
If I'm not mistaken.
This is a good time for me to take a break.
Yeah, Roger left because we're talking about Ingve.
He's like, all right, I'm leaving.
You triggered him.
So it was a stack, but it still has that kind of tonality to it.
Yeah, I remember I was still in high school. I was probably a senior, and I remember reading about Ingves. He was with Alcatraz, and I think they were partially interviewed, but they were making comments about his equipment, and they said something to the effect of that the DiMarzio he was using, that it was stacked so that it kind of got rid of the buzz, like you're talking about, the 60 cycle, but it still had the tonal principle of a Strat. So it didn't sound like a
noises
or anything, you know.
Yeah,
I love that about him, how he just, blew the flag for Fender, the traditional Fender Strat, and the single coils, and because that era we all know, Charvel and Kramer came out and started dominating.
It did distinguish him though, because it just had like the Strat kind of really suits his style, or vice versa. I feel like we develop our styles around what our favorite guitars are.
Sure.
I played Les Pauls mostly for the last 20 years, and I feel like I have a lot in common with other Les Paul players, because I think the instrument brings out something from you and your approach to it. And so the Strat with him is like, well, it doesn't sustain the way a humbucking guitar might, so let's play a lot of notes. It's a very articulate guitar, so I can play those notes and they will pop right out, but they're not going to stay as long. So we're just going to use the instrument itself to open up your creative side.
Yeah. Sure.
Oh, here's one. We're talking about 79, 80, 81. How about Crocus?
Oh
yeah, Crocus. That's right. Was that who's the album? Headhunter.
Well, they did have Headhunter, and I think they had was it Metal Rendezvous? I think was so they had a couple there on the verge of that 80, 81, and floating around in that hard rock type of sound,
Yeah, and coming out of Switzerland, which was
Switzerland, right? Switzerland,
like the most odd place for a band to come out of, especially for hard rock music. And then you go to Japan, you got Loudness. Amazing. Kiri
Takasaki.
Yeah, he's a wonderful guitar player.
Unbelievable. Super tasteful. He's I mean, we could talk about who the most underrated guitar players are. He would be
on the list of underrated great guitar players.
Good. He's everything a guitar player likes about great heavy metal guitar playing.
Right.
And virtuoso. He was just like very classical oriented, and it's kind of a mix of that and a little Eddie in there too.
Yeah, he still had that rock snarl about it. That's the thing, is like we're getting all these classical elements and this refined sort of, post jazz fusion sort of speediness and stuff. But now we got attitude, distortion, pinch harmonics, flash, and just fretboard pyrotechnics that are a turnoff to some of the older generation, and then the younger generation is going, give me more of that. How can I make that even closer than what I just heard?
Meanwhile, you still have AC/DC like chugging out, just
like
the same way they always have.
Bluesy pentatonics, right.
Or even the first, which was a big record for me as a kid when it came out. I used to listen to it religiously. First Fastway record.
Fastway,
Motorhead, and that was still, it wasn't a shreddy thing at all. It was very rock and roll, hard rock, basic stuff.
Pete Way on the bass, right?
Pete Way on bass, yeah.
Dave King on vocals.
Yeah, and also on drums it was what's his name?
Jerry Shirley.
Jerry Shirley, yes.
Was it Humble Pie? I think it was Jerry Shirley.
Yep.
Wild.
And I mean that was like, and that wasn't, that was just pure rock and roll.
I love that album. Just
the shreddy. Eddie Clark wasn't really diving into that whole.
It was, but it had this metallic appeal to it in that it was loud and punchy and powerful.
Like AC/DC.
AC/DC are basically playing virtually clean guitar, like Edge of Breakup, but it's the attack, and it's like It's how they hit the notes, when they hit the notes, what the chords are, and just and more important than any of that, it's the conviction with which they play everything.
Yeah.
It's just like, I want to punch you in the face with the clean JTM 45 sort of Marshall sound.
Yeah.
Is just as heavy as anything. If heavy is esoteric. Yeah.
Yeah. It's massive sounding, like ACDC had, what Fast Eddie had. It's just big, fat, big tone. That wasn't very gainy, but it just, I think the loudness of it just made it sound maybe more.
That conveys the volume conveys, and the amp just, I don't know, I always love amps that sound like they're about to break.
Right.
One of my favorite things to hear.
Destruction.
Yep.
Hey, was Fast Eddie, was he still playing a Strat with the humbucker, or is he during Fastway, or is he doing a lot? I don't remember.
Fastway, he switched to the Les Paul.
Yeah.
And he was using the Les Paul mainly.
Right. Okay. I thought just by the sound of it, it seemed more Les Paulish to me. Yeah.
But I've seen some videos before he died, and he was out doing some gigs with Fastway again, and he brought out the old Fender Strat.
Oh,
okay.
But it had the humbucker in it,
Yeah.
That he put in. He from what I understand, he just kind of switched to the Les Pauls, and that became
more of the sound there for Fastway. Yeah.
You know what record or what band has a Strat heavy metal sound is those early Tank records.
Oh,
yeah.
First two.
Yeah,
just
Howard the Hunter and
hear that single coil snap.
Yeah.
In the
guitar, real dirty and nasty.
But it was cool. Yeah, they really kind of.
I can not forget Tank.
Did something different. Well, we didn't. Luckily.
Yeah, right. We got them in there.
Got them in there. Have to. But yeah, you get that. Well, we could spend an hour on new wave of British heavy metal, because around there you have Warfare and bands like that. You have like all.
Then you had like the doomy element. You got Witchfinder General.
Yeah, and like
Sabbath kind of sound, and then you even had in the States, like especially the doomy thing. You had Trouble come out. The first Trouble record in 84, 83, 84 or something.
Yeah, around that time. Yeah.
And another super, like, talk about bottom end. I mean, that first Trouble record, that is like very low end, and
super straight.
And also like very melodic too. It's kind of like it's Sabbath meets kind of Thin Lizzy with the harmonies, and Judas Priest too, and they're
it's like the USA version of Candlemass, which is later, but like Candlemass has that sort of European heavy metal vibe with their
right. Yeah. Right. Totally.
Cheech wants to know how you guys feel about Richie Sambora and George Lynch.
Both great players.
Yeah.
I don't like that I have to listen to Dawkins in order to hear George Lynch so much. But, they're not my favorite, but he's awesome. So I grin and bear it. Richie Sambora.
I like early Dawkins. I like the early stuff. All those records. Bon Jovi, I've never been a fan, but Sambora's playing great.
I gotta give Bon Jovi credit, because I was born in 1982, and so Slippery When Wet was all their age in 1986 when I was learning what music was, and Bon Jovi, by all accounts, by my earliest memories and the collection of posters I used to have in my bedroom when I would see pictures of it, they were my favorite band. So it got the spark lit, but not long after that, I learned what heavier stuff was. And
right.
My favorite era with George Lynch personally was when they were doing like the Tooth and Nail, and then the Underlock Key. Because what I love about his playing there is he's got the fast stuff, but he's also got these really like emotional bluesy, where he'll hit a note and make it cry. He kind of got away from that later when it was more like real fast hammer-on-y stuff. On not say all the time, but a lot of the time. But those two, I love the blend of the emotional, the bluesiness, the soulfulness, and still the ripping dexterity. He can still flap the fretboard when he wanted to.
His
Yeah.
style is very unique too, because he doesn't play in a linear way, if does that make sense?
It
It
does.
almost sounds like it's like the way like Van Halen would play, where it almost just sounds like it's just he's channeling it from like some antenna that's like in his brain from
Right.
some other planet, and it's just like coming at him, and he doesn't even know what it's happening.
Yeah.
So like Hendrix was like that, Van Halen was like that, and a lot of George Lynch's playing is like that, where it has melody, but it's still very unconventional when you break it down just a little bit, even, you know.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I remember years ago, I read an old interview with George, probably in the early 90s, right when Lynch Mob was getting ready to take off. And he said in the interview, he really didn't know a lot of like, quote unquote scales or music theory. It was more like he just finds the stuff that captivates his ear and just starts kind of doing creative things and finding what really gets him excited about putting a solo idea together.
Yeah. I think a lot of guitar players just play based on shapes, you know?
Shapes, yeah.
Shapes and patterns. Like that,
Fingerboard patterns and shapes.
like I learned more about why certain scales sound the way they do, but like, I know like you learn the minor scale, then you learn that the harmonic minor scale has this note that you hit on accident once, and you're like, oh, that's cool. And then later you learn like why it's like the raised seventh of this.
Yeah, and it gives a different flavor when you sharpen the seven.
But it's more like, yeah, and Shaker too.
Shaker too. Yeah.
Same thing. He'll play like a traditional minor scale or a minor pentatonic scale, but then he's adding all these major notes in there. And to me, a lot of it comes down sometimes to like doing shapes that are economical. Like maybe you go across the fingerboard going like 4-3-1, 4-3-1, 4-3-1, 4-3-1, but you do it really fast and it sounds wild and wacky. Yeah. And there's a bunch of technically wrong notes there, but they're not wrong notes because it sounded cool and it actually makes you sound, complex or.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm starting to get into that with my own playing now. I've been like in the natural minor box for many years. And now I'm sort of just like, why don't I just go across the fingerboard and try some different shapes and see what they sound like? And I'm not necessarily thinking like, what's the scale called? Because I'm a guitar player. Like, I drive other real musicians nuts.
Welcome to my world.
Right.
Yeah.
He just mentioned the 4-3-1. I literally just saw something on that the other day where they were talking about somebody, I forget which guitar player it was. They said this is literally all he did all the time.
A lot of pattern kind of,
and it sounded good.
Yeah.
Van Halen would do that with the
Eddie had some runs like that.
The 1-2-4 licks. He would just pick a position and then just go like a
but it sounds so cool when he would do it, the way he'd roll across the fretboard.
Didn't he do that? That there are
right at the beginning,
some licks that are
not a scale. It's just
symmetrical patterns for the fingers. Yeah.
But the fact that there's like a couple weird notes in there actually makes it sound complex and interesting. Whereas if you were playing it the harder way, but the proper way, it makes it sound, that's what I've been doing. I've been playing everything proper. And now I'm like looking like I've kind of had my fun with it. Like, let's break some rules now. Like,
right.
That so
right. Yeah. And here's a band that was mentioned earlier. For me is one of my favorite bands and huge influence guitar playing wise, especially as a guitar team. It's Merciful Fate.
Oh my God.
And, Michael Denner and Hank Sherman, and two very different guitar players too. Because Denner was like Schenker, two Michaels, but very melodic. And then you had Hank Sherman, was this very more chaotic kind of guitar player. But they were still even their approach to guitar playing was still very 70s rooted, I would say, compared to they weren't your Eddie Van Halen, they weren't nothing like George Lynch or anything like that. It was a little bit more melodic and traditional approach to guitar playing. But Merciful Fate, just huge band. I mean, I would think never became the big band, but they influenced so many, whether it's Metallica or Billy Corgan or whatever, Merciful Fate had such a huge influence across the board. They were many guitar players and in heavy rock music, period. metal.
and super progressive. Like you hear, they'll have like they'll switch time signatures on a dime. They'll switch keys on a dime.
Yeah.
And then they'll have like these ferocious heavy metal riffs, but then they'll bust into like 2 measures of straight up 70s Keith Richards chords, and then like
yeah,
like,
you're right.
Yeah, it's awesome. Great songwriting and like.
Did you see that documentary, the Flying V documentary? Jeremy?
No, where's that?
Really good. Oh, it's excellent. It's on Prime, but I think it's on YouTube now too.
Okay.
So every
All
big
the guys.
Flying V guy is like, whether it's Wishbone Ash to to Metallica, Wolf Hoffman, everybody's on there. Michael Schenker, Michael Denner from Merciful Fate, Hank Sherman.
Mhm.
But James Hetfield is on there, and he's talking about Merciful Fate, and he was saying that what you just said about their arrangements, like he goes, when I heard Merciful Fate, I was like, it's okay to have all these different parts in there, and let's throw this in there too and see what happens, and because he was just like, wow, they have an 8-minute song, and it's got all these different parts. And,
they would always come back to a hook.
Yeah.
They would come back. They always had a hook, but then they would go off on these tangents, and they also had like this groove sometimes where like groove, you just make the groove, that face where you just damn. And great guitar band, but also image wise, the idea of King Diamond was very dangerous back then, and the idea of singing so overtly and constantly about satanic themes that were like in your face and like visually satanic themes at a time when that was still,
like Venom, the dark imagery, like Venom, but amazing musicians.
Yeah, they kind of took the Venom vibe, which Venom's version was almost like tongue in cheek.
Yeah,
it was just like, we're naughty, and then Merciful Fate was like, no, we're real. We're actually
we're the real deal.
and I think like from what I gather, people really did like were afraid of King Diamond. At that time, he was just such a mysterious character.
Yeah, he as a kid, Melissa, looking on the back of the record, I was like, man, this guy, this is the real deal right here.
And nothing against his solo stuff, but like those early Fate records, his vocals are so mean sounding.
Very different approach.
He's still got this aggressive approach that I love. Which I feel like with his solo stuff, he tries to go more kind of, I wouldn't say softer, but more operatic and refined version of that. But I like the sort of snottiness of the EP and the first 2 full lengths where
there's 3 records right there.
It's acrobatic vocally, it's acrobatic guitar playing. The drumming and the bass playing is unbelievable.
Drumming and bass playing, phenomenal. Yeah.
So like
Tim Hansen.
You just have these bands all exploding, and they're playing with such passion and fury and recklessness. Whereas before, it wasn't.
And not afraid to write a progressive song. Not afraid to have an 8-minute song with a lot of different changes and stuff like that. And,
they're probably like, we live in Copenhagen. We're never going to get found out about. Let's just please ourselves.
Right.
And then, they do get found out about, but, it's just like, I feel like the lesson of heavy metal that a lot of other genres could follow is like, if you just got to be real and sincere and do the thing that you want to do, and people will either dig it or they won't. But if you're trying to please others, but not please yourself, that's not what this music's about.
And that's the thing. I mean, not to get into the politics of the music business, but the bands that usually last the test of time are the bands that just did their own thing and said fuck off, and they may have struggled. There may be periods where the band struggles a bit, but they're still standing. And those bands that just follow whatever the trend is, the flavor of the week is, they're usually gone. They may have that one hit record, and then they're gone. But especially like the glam thing that happened in the 80s and all. I mean, but then there's the bands like Motley Crue and Rat, which I would consider the real deal,
Yeah,
and all those bands that just kind of copy them because, in the music business, they jump on the bandwagon. Oh, this is selling. Let's sign a band that sounds just like this and looks just like this,
Right. Well, I think, that early wave of that Sunset Strip, like stuff like, I think even Poison had a sincerity about them, where they're not necessarily like, they're more like Kiss to me, where they're like, yeah, we're over the top, and so what? We're not going to apologize for it.
Yeah,
but then
from there
comes the next wave of
it's a different, it's good time music, and there's nothing wrong with that,
right? But from there,
the 90s and things got like, oh, we're depressed and
whole different.
But then you get like the second wave of imitators, where you get like, I don't want to name too many bands in case anybody likes them. I mean, we have any Bullet Boys fans here? I don't know, but like bands like that.
Benya? Yeah, me.
No.
Like president of the fan club.
Like Motley Crue comes out, or Rat, or these bands from that early part of that scene, and it's like fresh and it's wild. These guys look crazy. They're wearing crazy outfits, crazier than even before. And then everybody looks at that, sees that they're getting signed, and goes, "Oh, we got to go do that now." But then you can always spot and hear the imitators because they're just never as good.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Bullet Boys. I remember Bullet Boys that was when I first got MTV. They were like, I never had MTV in my whole life, and then I got it.
Cancel MTV now. I said, you saw the Bullet Boys.
Girls, if you're watching this right now and you're below a certain age, MTV used to play music.
Wow, what a shock.
Oh, yeah.
My Pregnant Giraffe.
Or Jersey, Jersey
My Pregnant
Shore.
Teenager.
They did have some other stuff on besides just the music. I don't know if you guys remember. This is how I discovered it, which is one of my favorite TV shows, was The Young Ones. ABC show.
Yeah.
They used to have The Young Ones on maybe around like 84 or something.
And Remote Control. Remember that show? The game
Remote
Control.
Yeah.
They should bring that. They should just play old reruns of that stuff.
Yeah.
MTV used to be it used to be a music channel.
Well, it used to just also be kind of like it like the music of that time, like it had edge to it because it was new and not yet so
I got a question about that. This shows how far removed I am from MTV. Is MTV still exist?
As a station, yes.
I only know that because when I'm scrolling by it, I see it on the menu.
Same here. It does, but I haven't watched it in years.
The programming is I don't know what they do, but like they still have a Video Music Awards show every year, which I find interesting because like that used to be a big deal when MTV was the purveyor of music videos. Now I guess it's like YouTube and everything else.
Yeah, but let's not forget Headbangers Ball.
I used to tape that.
Well, I mean, the amazing thing about MTV when you go back to the early 80s is, for those of us that were around in those days into the hard, heavy music, the only time you've seen anything is if you got like Cream Magazine or Circus or Hit Parade or whatever. It was the magazine back then. It was the only way you really kind of saw what these guys look like, So MTV comes along and you got, Van Halen, you got Def Leppard and, Iron Maiden, I remember seeing like Number of the Beast video and Run to the Hills. And Judas Priest,
And it made
Eventually, or Heading Out to the Highway was on there. I remember seeing that, and
that's
I was like, oh my god, this is insane. It's like it was such a huge big deal to see these people in person.
Was there a band that any of you, and I'll name one in a minute for me, that you didn't know who they were, and like, oh, I saw this band for the first time ever on Headbangers Ball, and now I'm into them. I got to go out and get their album, and I'll talk about a specific band that did that for me initially.
Trying to think, it might have been like Danzig.
Danzig, okay.
Or like where you would see logos on bands you like T-shirts,
right?
And then Headbangers Ball was when you actually got to like hear what they sounded like without buying the tape and spending $10 that maybe was like half your allowance for the week.
Right.
Oh, that's a good question.
For me, I was Halloween. I didn't know who Halloween was, and then I remember seeing the video.
Yeah.
I guess it was the keeper, that when all that was coming out, and I thought, wow, what a band out of Germany. Almost Maiden-esque in spots, but some other things happening too, some proggy stuff, some metal, the operatic vocals. So I really was, I still am a big fan, and didn't know about them until I saw their video on MTV's Headbangers Ball.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Well,
Halloween, it was Walls of Jericho. That was a record that I heard.
Yeah, right. And I went back and found all their other things like that. That's a wonderful album. Yeah.
Well, we used to set the VCR up with the timer to tape it in case we like were out on because it was usually like a Friday or Saturday night. You might be out with friends.
Yeah.
But it was also the only way we could we weren't going to see the video for Wake Up Dead at 2 p.m.
Right. Yes.
So if you wanted to see those videos and hear those songs and experience that, you would just go back to the VHS pile and pop it in, like fast forwarding. Is this the one with Wake Up Dead on, or whatever song you're trying to find?
Yeah.
Or do you like Morbid Angel?
Yeah, I remember them. That was you had to wait till the end of the night.
Yeah. They flashier stuff towards the end. Yeah, there's some good stuff there. Yeah.
I personally like to.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of.
I learned Winger from Beavis and Butthead.
This guy's
This is later on. This would have been which is I guess
yeah. So that's a new thing too. Because
Caius, I heard Caius on MTV.
Yeah,
and it was on Headbangers Ball actually.
But that's
not really a heavy metal band, but Caius was probably.
But for 80s, getting back to where we are, MTV is kind of important for. Imagine Van Halen's already big, but look what MTV does for a band like that.
Yeah. And you guys remember they played Ozzy, Speak of the Devil, with Brad Gillis on guitar.
Yeah, and Van Halen was so meant for the visual medium, with David Lee Roth having his, there's a camera, I want to be the center of it. Right. And Eddie just always smiling when he's playing and stuff. And it was just a way to kind of expose the personalities of a band that you only got on records, which we take for granted now. And I've made some music videos. I don't care for the process, but it is a necessary thing to kind of convey a visual image the way the cover of your album might do.
Right.
That's something that comes about in that era too, which helped a lot of bands and probably hurt a lot of other bands.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, here's one I got into, which is not even metal. The Cure.
Oh wow!
Okay. Is the early Cure video from one of the early, before they kind of broke big, and I just remember, what's his name, Robert Smith.
Robert Smith.
Yeah. So Robert Smith, he was this very, different looking.
Yeah.
There was something really odd about him, especially in those early 80s. And I was a metal kid and hard rock and metal, but that kind of introduced me to a different, style of music.
There's something about the Cure where they could kind of transcend.
It was dark. It was dark. It was really dark.
Yeah.
Well, that was the cool thing about MTV is you could be into something I've always loved hard rock and heavy metal since I was a little kid. But then I also loved when Michael Jackson videos came on. I liked Madonna, and I liked watching these alternative shows about this esoteric college music of the era.
Oh,
And then
right, right, yeah.
so you learn it. So you watch like 120 minutes, and then you're getting influenced by The Cure or
Sonic Youth, and
like you're like, oh, Sonic Youth, that's a thing. Like
Smithereens.
right, yeah. So you get everybody's kind of getting this cross pollination, which I think really does affect how that decade of not just metal, but metal specifically for the sake of our discussion, does evolve to a point where later on you get a band like Celtic Frost that's got that goth influence, or just bands that are sort of like, or even Metallica, like the fact that they do a Killing Joke cover, like, is a surprise to a lot of people when it comes out. I imagine you're like, but then you go listen to it and you're like, oh, this is not metal, but it has the same kind of appeal to it.
Yeah, appeal, right.
That first Killing Joke record it's a heavy record, man.
Oh yeah, and then it diversifies, because nobody who plays any style of music is only influenced by that style of music, like in terms of songwriting. And we're all, as songwriters, we're always looking for that edge or that new thing to kind of incorporate into what you're doing to just keep evolving. Like I was talking about earlier, I'm trying to use some new scales in my solos or patterns just to kind of stop sounding like I always sound. And one of the ways to do that is to get curious. And if you find something from something else, which is MTV kind of opened the door for, I feel, for a lot of us to kind of, we're metalheads, but there's also this other music out there that we never would have probably heard otherwise at that moment, if not for this kind of interestingly curated place where everybody was going.
Right. Yeah. You're right. There was a lot of different stuff, on MTV. You had, everything from Madonna to Accept. I remember seeing Balls to the Wall in there.
Yeah, right.
And
that was
that's
like
another band, a big band. I would say is Accept. Is really Accept. Right?
Oh yeah.
Another really important band. I think. History of heavy music.
Yeah. They're to me, they are like a direct influence on stuff I've been doing in recent years. Just like the vibe, the riffs, the style, the power. And
we didn't mention the Scorpions because
in
1980, was it Animal Magnetism came out, right? Yep. So that was the first full record with Matthias.
Okay,
right, because Shanker was on Love Drive and some of it.
Yeah. So that was also kind of a slightly a new beginning for Scorpions, where they're becoming more about just straightforward rock songs, compared to the Uli era, which had a mix of that, which was like this progressive kind of element and mixed in with this hard rock thing,
just beautifully tasteful soloing from.
Oh yeah, I love his Genesis.
You can sing his solos, and this is when they also got into the habit of opening up most of their songs with solos, or many of them, which is like that,
right?
Like they would just be like 1, 2, 3, 4 solo intro, like
right, the solo in the intro.
It was a device that not a lot of bands were doing, but the solo intro was like this. It was flashy like a solo, but it had a melody you could sing too. That was great about his style of playing in general.
Yeah, very thematic,
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, so we're just on the cusp probably of getting to where things get nasty. We've Motorhead, and
we could save that for the next episode.
Because that's a cool rabbit hole to go down.
Because that's when things get. It's when it's that's the stuff that directly, particularly in the case of Alex and to some degree myself, like influences our life path in a way where we're like becoming participants in this thing.
Yeah.
We're trying to find the most extreme way to express ourselves through metal, and it doesn't exist.
Well, it became that, it became like my voice, my generation,
Right. Yeah.
my small group of people, which it was at first, and then it just off the way it did, which is still baffling. Even we really haven't got much into Metallica, but they that Kill 'Em All record coming out just pretty much changed everything.
Well, yeah, I think that's kind of where we're headed, because like it's not quite the big bang as Van Halen 1 in terms of
Right.
like what but like it is in its own way, but more of an underground way, because you already had Maiden, you already had Fate, and you already had like all these bands kind of pushing the envelope, and then they Motorhead, Diamond Head,
Yeah.
and then they're the next thing.
That's when we figured out we could get our music out there without being on a big label or anything like that.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too. It inspires
a
us.
small network, worldwide that was happening, and Metallica. I mean, it still blows my mind to this day about Metallica when I really think back on it, because a lot of my friends, and they were my buddies that were older than me, that were all into heavy metal and hard rock. They didn't get Metallica at first.
No,
was like the black sheep, and they were just like, what is this noise? Now, fast forward 5 years later or something, they're all about it, but but at first, they just didn't get it. And it still blows my mind that they became like the Zeppelin or the Beatles of this era, like how massive and how influential, and it's not even just metal, it's just like across the board, their fan base. And
they sell out stadiums.
Blows my
It doesn't
mind.
make sense.
I mean, I knew that they were something special. I knew, because I heard in one day, I had a friend of mine. He was my friend's uncle, but he was only like 3 or 4 years older than us, but he was his uncle, and he played for us. I'm pretty sure it was January of '84, if I remember correctly. It was like right after Christmas. I heard Kill 'Em All, Merciful Fate, Melissa, and Exciter, Heavy Metal Maniac. I heard in his house, and I was just like, what the fuck is this? Holy shit. It just blew my mind hearing this stuff. And because that was the underground.
Yeah. Well, suddenly it becomes the next level. And it's like heavy metal is always like the heaviest, obviously. But like it's always that boundary pushing thing. And this was just like the next explosion, but it was like a significant one.
I mean, if you think about from like 1980 to say 85, there was so much happened there with heavy music, just so many leaps and bounds,
Right.
That was happening guitar wise and sonically sounding, everything, production wise, everything, is just like really like progressing in different directions.
It could make for an interesting podcast episode, don't you think?
Yeah. We'll yeah. But is there anything, guys, any other bands that you really like to mention?
I want to talk about maybe two other things off of mine that kind of fits in, I think. So going back, we're talking about 1980. We've already talked about a lot of good stuff. One band we haven't talked about that probably had the most unusual twist from being a 70s hard rock, Rush. So you get Rush into they had Hemispheres. And then they're going to be doing these 80s records. And then you've got, of course, that's going to end up going into 81, which would be Moving Pictures. And they started bringing almost like a new wave influence. Early Rush has a lot of Zeppelin. Then there's a lot of prog. And then all of a sudden, there's almost like a new wave vibe there that got kind of kicked them into the, the 80s. So like Free Will, Spirit of the Radio, Tom Sawyer.
Yeah, more stripped down. It was starting to get more stripped down, Rush,
And to Alex's point about Metallica going from nobody gets who we are to suddenly everybody is a fan, Rush had that moment in 81.
Yeah.
Right.
80, 81, where it was like they can't get arrested. And then suddenly all like the diehard people who got it the whole time are suddenly surrounded by all these people who are telling them they were dorks for listening to this music. And then they're like, yeah, I love this band. And you're like, what?
Right, exactly.
And
And
so,
you know, we talked
that
about
was
bands.
a big album that year too. 'Cause I remember like all my friends from school had the Star with the Rush because we used to write on our books and our book bags, logos, and all that kind of stuff. And
well, it's an awesome record, man. Moving pictures.
oh yeah,
Great guitar tones. It's
but
got
a shift, like Rick said, like
definitely a shift, and very different from any other of the bands. Like if you go back into the 70s, we talked about Black Sabbath and
Yes too.
Rainbow,
Yes,
yeah, exactly.
shift
And then with
too.
Rush, it's like, okay, we're doing this. We're gonna put some new wave in there, some prog in there, some hard rock, some avant-garde kind of things here and there, and put it in a blender and still make it somewhat accessible. And bam, you've got that 80, 81 era of Rush.
you like
Yes, Owner of a Lonely Heart with what's it, Trevor Rabin on guitar.
Trevor Rabin. Yeah,
It's like more focused on a more pop sensibility, I guess, to the music, and also a bit of that new wave influence too. I think some of the sounds,
Well, and I think Rush and Yes could have been two bands that kind of made it through. We've talked about Jefferson Airplane, where they, like everybody seemed like they wanted to be kind of futuristic in the 80s,
right?
Yeah,
and Rush and Yes may have actually survived. What's that?
They were called, what were they called? Starship. They changed it to Starship.
Jefferson Airplane.
Yeah.
And then we built this.
Then they were just Starship. They got rid of Jefferson.
Yeah.
And then it's just Starship at that point.
Yeah, because late 70s would have been Jefferson Starship, and then Starship in the 80s.
Correct. Yep.
And so but Rush and Yes could have been two of those bands that kind of lived through that goofiness and didn't become maybe.
They didn't they were staying true to the times while also kind of refining whatever they were, but like they did it with sincerity. Like when you listen to like Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures, you can hear the band's evolving and stripping its sound down a bit, but you can also hear that like by then they've heard what the Police sound like. They've been listening to reggae, they've been listening to new wave music in general. And unlike a lot of bands from their era, a lot of bands that they toured with that probably saw that music as a threat, they saw it as like, it wasn't a bandwagon jump for them. It was just like, oh, this is the new, fresh, cool sound. I like things about this. Let's incorporate it into what we do, but still be us.
Right.
Because Moving Pictures still hits hard in a lot of the songs. It's still punchy. But then, you have those dynamic moments where they're incorporating different elements of what was happening at the time. Judas Priest, as a heavy metal version, was very good at doing that too.
Mm-hmm.
You go from Rock-a-Rolla, which definitely sounds like it's of the era, and then you get to Defenders, and then you get to Painkiller. Painkiller is a pretty extreme album for a band that started in like 1970, 69, because it's like, again, just that ability to stay curious and not lose touch with that inner teenager that's like obsessed and excited about music all the time and not getting so full of yourself or high on yourself or jaded or any combination of those things.
Right. Now, where does Cars fit in? The Cars fit in all this.
I guess that's a new wave,
They kind of lumped them out as being like, because I was a young kid back then, but I was getting these magazines we're talking about, and they kind of had them in the new wave sort of category, I mean, but they saw some cool stuff. He's a great guitar player.
I love the Cars. Always loved it.
I think one of the coolest songs that caught my attention was Moving in Stereo.
Moving in Stereo, yeah.
I don't know why, but that really caught my attention.
Yeah, it's a captivating song. I love that song.
Well, it was in a movie.
Oh, okay.
Remember it was,
Oh,
and I still remember
I know
they're
what
like,
you're right.
Was
Is it Fast Times at Ridgemont High?
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
I gotta go back and watch that.
Yeah,
I think, yeah.
You are correct.
yeah. Which the only famous person from Fredericksburg was in
Oh, that's right.
Judge
Reinhold.
Reinhold is
Yeah.
from here.
I gotta
From our
mention
area,
one band that's really under the radar, but I felt was a great hard rock band, which was Riot.
Oh, geez.
You know,
Hell yeah.
and nobody talks about them enough.
When did Fire Down Under come out? Was that like 82?
80 was it 81?
81? Damn.
You know, and the first record came out in 78, I think.
Yeah.
So,
Fire Down Under is like,
oh, that's amazing.
It's like a prototype record of like, this is what awesome sounds like.
Right,
yeah.
Unfortunately, they never got that, you know,
No, they
needed, you know.
they followed their own path to doing different stuff. They kind of went more of like a European power metal vibe over the years.
Yeah.
But that moment,
Very
they captured lightning in a bottle in that record, like it with the weird baby seal on the album cover.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy who produced a lot of Paul, who produced a lot of the Inhalation records. He did some of their stuff, and
cool.
to go out on the road with them and do sound for them and stuff.
Oh wow, story time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when I went on tour when I toured with Ross.
Yeah, Riot. Yeah, what a great band, great guitar playing. And
yeah.
Mark Real, right?
Mark Reale at the
Reale.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. He passed away a few years back, I think.
Yeah.
Riot. You know, I think they did that. Some of that tour, that legendary tour with Ozzy, Def Leppard, and Motorhead. I think they were on some of those shows.
Oh, no kidding.
That tour, 80 was that 81? That tour happened. You know, so the first Blizzard tour in the States with Randy. You know, so I think Riot was on some of those shows.
So here's a question I want to throw out for everybody. So we're seeing all these changes in bands here, 80, 81, like we're talking about. Some going heavier, some going new wave-ish, some going pop. How much of that was the record company, you know, or the man, as Jack Black would say in school?
I'm sure they had a big part.
Hey, this is where we're going with our music. This is where we want to go with this.
Yeah, well, I definitely
think we're entering that era in the 80s, right?
Well, that's still 90, 81, because some bands like, the Kiss thing, I mean, they went really pop, like we said earlier, but then you got Priest putting out a crunchy album there with British Steel. So at that point, is that just the band saying, this is where we're going? Or was there somebody at the record, an A&R person or a record company person saying, we think your trajectory should go this way, in our opinion?
Well, I think what it was the kids, like I was one of those kids that, that was just, attracted to that whole thing of hearing that music, and the record companies just picked up on that, because if you guys remember, disco was king, it's
right. Oh yeah, I remember that as a young kid.
As much as I respect the Bee Gees and stuff, I remember like with my my one cousin, like in arguments over the Bee Gees and stuff, because I liked Kiss and Sabbath and Alice Cooper when I was a kid, and and then like that was like like heavy music was kind of over in a sense, in the so-called music business. And, by 1980, a lot of these records that we all talked about were starting to come out, and we're starting to make an impact on the younger kids, So the record companies are like, all right, money, we see something in this, we need to pick up on this now. But then you had the other side of the tracks. You got bands like Heart that were like, a pretty hard rock band of the 70s, and you got the record label telling them they need to write poppy songs.
We need a single.
I guess it just depends, because
Aerosmith getting outside writers, like
right.
But I know with like Rush evolving, we
didn't talk about Aerosmith enough, I don't think, on the show.
No, we didn't.
Right.
But like Rush by then had already established that they couldn't be messed with, because they did 2112 against their record label's will, and it was successful. So like, whatever we do is what we're going to do. Yeah. And I wonder if some of it, like in the sense of like Rainbow going from awesome power metal to, Since You've Been Gone, I wonder if some of that is also within the group themselves because
Well,
like
yeah,
putting
I
pressure.
think Richie wanted to write. That's why the
Yeah, he's like, we got to get up. Like,
he wanted to get more radio friendly.
right. So if you're
I like
grinding,
that stuff too, a Rainbow. I like the Joe Lynn Turner era. I like
yeah,
Street of Dreams and Stone. It was a Stone Cold, and
but I do think that was an era of record label pressure in the sense that like records cost like $100,000 to make. Back in the day.
Yeah.
Now we're lucky if we get 5% of that to make an album. So like the record labels did kind of have a say because they were putting up so much money, unless you were an artist of extreme clout, but you only had clout as long as you were selling. So, but I do think, to Alex's point, if you had a good rep at your label, which, I've had the fortune of having over the last, several years, the two labels I've been on, they kind of just let you do your thing, but they might make a suggestion. But but also if the underground is bubbling up and saying we want louder, faster, heavier, the record label is just going to be like, here, go.
Well, Metallica and Maiden are probably the two exceptions that they were doing, just doing their own thing, and record labels couldn't say anything because they're selling records, and they're, like even Maiden, from what I understand, their manager, Rod Smallwood,
Smallwood,
he had the game. They already had the game plan from the first record, so like down to the date when each record will come out and the tours, and also them not spending money. Like, we need to put money into this, and you guys can't go out and spend all this money on these big houses and all this kind of shit. They did shit really smart, which, especially in the hair, whatever you want to call it, the hard rock of the 80s of bands from LA. Those guys were spending money. It's funny when I hear that term, hair metal. I never heard that back in the 80s. It's like,
no, it was like
never ever heard that
later.
But where those guys were just out of control, and then you got a band like Iron Maiden that were just really like business smart and taking care of everything. And they already had the image. They had Eddie. They didn't. But they had every record, from what I understand, like up to like 85, 86, like down.
I never knew that. Never knew that. That's interesting.
Yeah. It also, this was the era of bands being managed. Like, I don't know about Immolation, but I've never been in a band where the manager was, not somebody in the band. So like, you have like this, like a band like Rush had a very protective manager. Rod Smallwood with Maiden, he was that guy that would be the conduit between the label and say, no, trust me, I got to. He's, so that's part of it too. Some of these bands probably had managers saying, you got to change with the times and write a radio hit, just like a label. The manager is seeing dollar signs too. And then Metallica, same thing. Once they got linked up with in like Ride the Lightning era with Q Prime, who they're still with, it was like they had this conduit between record label pressure and the band, so the band could just be themselves and do it. And that's something that most bands at that level at that time that they were at would not necessarily have the great luxury of having in this particular era we find ourselves in now, because of just the money is gone. So
yeah.
Another interesting thing in that era, this 80, 81, 82 era we're talking about, look what happened to Van Halen. So you get to 81, they put out probably their darkest, heaviest album, in my opinion, Fair Warning, which is one of my all-time favorite albums from anybody. And I love it. Eddie's guitar playing is just on fire. Then what comes after Fair Warning? Then they go to Diver Down, which is like just a fun beach time covers album. All different vibes of that record.
Yeah, but stuff was happening so fast too. Like, you get like Van Halen 1 and Van Halen 2 are like not. I don't even know if they're a year apart on the calendar.
Oh yeah, they were fast.
Yeah, very, very fast. Yeah.
And so they were just putting out the cycle of like record, tour was quite condensed for a little bit. I mean,
There's the days of that, you know. It's like putting out records, tour.
Yeah, it's like what?
You know, unlike nowadays, it's like, oh, okay, well, every 5-6 years we'll put out an album and or for 4 years.
But also, like,
that's a great point with the Van Halen 1 and 2. For those of us that were alive when that was going on,
I was
Van Halen 2 was so soon after that. It was almost a continuation of the first album.
You're right.
Even like first, you know, Zeppelin and Sabbath, you know, they're both their first 2 albums came out in the same year, 69.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
Zeppelin first 2 Sabbath records came out in 1970, you know, and you know, it's like working bands, really working.
Yeah. Right.
Well, also Queen. I mean, 73, 70.
Yeah,
Queen 1, Queen 2, Sheer Heart Attack, just boom, 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 right like that. They've got 3 albums out.
And that's that's another discussion with Queen in the 80s. It's another shift too, you know.
Right, another band that really shifted a lot. Yeah.
But the Queen was always kind of one of those bands that they were very diverse, you know. It's like you got like super heavy stuff, and then you got this kind of like
operatic.
Or like this kind of like
quirky and
1940s vibe.
Yeah, vaudeville at times with some of the things Freddie Mercury was doing back in that era, you know.
Yeah.
So. And the Game album, of course, that was an 80, and I was
great
I remember hearing Queen all the time on the radio, and that's definitely not quite like Ogre Battle from 1974, you know, or Prophet Song from. I mean, very different vibe to it. So you've got another one, Bites the Dust, and you got, you know, Rockabilly with Crazy Little Thing Called Love, and that was, you know, one of their biggest selling albums at the time. Very Americana-ish, I guess you could say, with some of the influences on that album.
Yeah, I agree, totally.
Yeah. All right, are we going to close this episode? We're almost on 2 hours.
Oh, we are? Now. Okay, I got to sneak one final thing in just in that era before we do our next episode. The last thing in that era, Vandenberg, about 1982. Vandenberg's guitar playing on that first Vandenberg.
Yeah. Good record, great guitar player.
Yeah. It was kind of Schenker-esque in spots. You know, he's talked about Michael being a big influence on him, and you know, I just thought it was a really cool album. I thought it was fairly new because I saw some reviews in Guitar Magazine.
We didn't talk about the Dio solo stuff too.
No, we didn't.
Vivian Campbell.
Well, here we go.
Yeah. Maybe we'll bleed that into what's coming next.
Yeah, that'll kind of give you a good segue for our next episode. And then that's going to get real interesting because you got all kinds of fun, cool stuff going to happen.
So Alex, we're still going to go through the British era, right?
Mm-hmm.
In late 80s. And then we're going to go into the heavier, harder stuff. I'm only saying this because I know
that happened in the
evolution, so it's going to get heavier.
The 80s, the heavy stuff, you know.
Yeah, it gets really heavy.
The 80s it starts, but then it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm only saying this so people know we will eventually get there, because I know there's a lot of death metal people that watch this. And
you got to keep you coming. So we're
I'm just kind of like, okay, it'll be here. Just hang with us. We'll get there.
Watch where this is going to go.
There too, besides the heavy stuff.
Yeah. And then we'll be back every once in a while to talk about guitars too. So we have some guitar stuff that Alex and I have been dying to talk about too. So.
Yeah.
All right. So I think this is we're almost at 2 hours.
About
so
the 2 hour mark. All right.
I'll take us out. Everybody down there, like and subscribe, and we appreciate. There's still people hanging out. We appreciate you hanging in this long, and we'll see you next time.
All right.
If I can get my mouse to move, there we go. All right. Take care, everybody.
Later.